why your body responds the same to both perceived stress and real stress. Welcome to your daily hit of grace and grit, your quick dose of inspiration to kickstart your day. This show is proudly sponsored by Rumble and Rise. To find out more about joining Rumble and Rise, head on over to graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. I'm Courtney Townley, and here is today's hit. Your body does not differentiate between an actual emergency and chronic mental load that you carry every day. And that's really important to remember. So the email that you haven't answered, the conversation that you keep replaying in your brain, the thing that you might be forgetting, the future that you're trying to control, the people around you that you're trying to control, all activates the same physiological stress response. Your body doesn't know the difference between real and imagined stress. So we can create a tremendous amount of unnecessary stress response by imagining and worrying and trying to control things in our environment. And this plays out a lot in my coaching practice because over the years, one of the first questions I usually ask a client when she comes in to work with me is, how stressed are you? On a scale from 1 to 10, what's your stress load? And I can hear in the way that she talks, the cadence of her words, the intensity of her speech, that there's a high stress load. I also know because she's usually filled out a questionnaire ahead of time and I can see the load of her life. But it's interesting because a lot of women answer that question saying, I don't feel very stressed at all. And yet, these same women are often not sleeping. They notice their cravings are more intense at night. They notice that their patience has gone out the window, so they're very reactive. They are putting weight on more quickly than they ever have in their life, so their body composition is really shifting. And what that tells me is not that there's a food or exercise issue. It tells me that there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of uncompleted stress cycles. Because stress isn't just what happens to you. This is really important to know. It's about whether your body gets the signal that the stress has passed, that the stress is now over. And in nature, we see this play out all the time. An animal escapes a threat, and then it finishes the stress response. It either runs until it's safe, it starts shaking, like a lot of times you'll see an animal shake really aggressively after it's escaped a threat. It might tremble. It discharges adrenaline through movement. And then what does it do? It goes back to grazing and resting or grooming. What it doesn't do is keep replaying the loop. And that completion is what tells the nervous system we've survived and we're safe now. So in modern life, we rarely get that kind of completion. So the stress response can stay switched on long after the moment has passed. And for a lot of women in the midlife season, I would argue it just feels like stress is never over. There's always something to think about, to stress about, to manage, to anticipate, or to carry, or to solve. One of the things I work on a lot with my clients is trying to get them to understand that a healthy, regulated nervous system is, of course, intended to get engaged and even stressed out during the day. Like stress can be a beautiful thing because it's what helps us to get things done. So that's a very normal part of the day to increase our engagement with our life. But regulation looks like also pollinating our day with periods of recovery and restoring and resetting and nourishing. But in modern life, it is so easy to override all of that. So we're just living in a state of chronically escalating stress. And research on stress physiology shows that when activation is not followed by downregulation, of course, the nervous system is going to stay in a really protective state. That state of hyperdrive quite literally changes how you metabolize food, how you store fat, how clearly you can think and problem solve, and how much energy you have available for follow-through. Because think about it, if your body is always perceiving that there is threat, your digestion slows. Your body does not have a priority of getting rid of fat storage. In fact, it wants to accumulate more fat storage as a protection mechanism. Our prefrontal cortex goes offline, so we aren't very good at solving problems or thinking very clearly. And we waste a tremendous amount of energy that we could be using for other things in our day. So I think we need to be asking less, maybe the question, how do I reduce stress? Because that's not really realistic for a full life. The better question to be asking is, how often do I give my body the felt experience of decompression? How often do I remind my body that it is safe? Not intellectually safe, but physically safe. Can you go for a walk without input? Like, a lot of people are walking, which is great, but they're also listening to the chaos of the world because they have their ear pods in and they're listening to the news, or they're listening to maybe true crime that stresses their system out. So even though they're doing something that would, in another setting, perhaps downregulate them, the input that's coming in through their ears is actually keeping them in a heightened state of stress. Can you eat a meal without multitasking? Because of course, eating is wonderful for the human body. But if you're multitasking, you're probably not even digesting that food very well because your system is stressed out. Can you close your eyes and just take a few deep breaths between responsibilities? Hand on your heart and just checking in with yourself? Can you find moments in the day for laughter, a little sunlight, human touch, stillness? Because let's be honest, these are things a lot of women are malnourished in. They don't remember the last time they laughed. They never go outside. They don't touch other humans because they've got too much to do. And stillness, that freaks their brain out because it's so uncomfortable because they're so out of practice with doing it. But these things are not small lifestyle upgrades. They are the off switch for the stress response. So your body is not confused. It's waiting for a signal that the demand has ended. It is waiting for you to recognize that life cannot be an ever-escalating stress response because the body can't survive that. So how today might you pollinate in a few reminders to your body that you are safe, that the stress has ended, that you are now nourishing and restoring and decompressing. If this stirred something inside of you, imagine what a whole book of clarity and courage could ignite. The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health and happiness, goes even deeper into the mindset and practices that create real, meaningful change at midlife. Grab your copy today over at theconsistencycode.com and keep the momentum alive.